A Cape Cod author is asking what if when it comes to Marilyn Monroe. In Maybe Marilyn, Lois Cahall imagines a world where the Hollywood star survived and disappeared. She spoke to CBS News Boston digital producer Riley Rourke about the new book.
So you just released Maybe Marilyn. Do you want to tell viewers a little bit about the book?
Sure. So this is the book. Here we go.
Oh, that's
Marilyn.
great.
And it's an image of either Marilyn or someone else, which I'll tell you what it's about. So what if Marilyn Monroe didn't die? What if during the several hours where no one called the police in real life, she got away, was issued a new identity by, I don't know, someone in the White House? This was in the 60s. So now we fast forward many years later, and two reporters in 2019, so it's many years later. Now we have social media, we have the web, we have everything, right? It's a different world than it was in the early 60s. They get a tip that Marilyn is alive. Whether or not they find her remains to be seen, but they end up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where they find her very alive granddaughter. That's the key. That's the key.
And that's such a fun and exciting concept. And what inspires you to create this book? Like, where did this idea come from?
Well, I think it's really about women as survivors, not victims. And we're in that whole Me Too era, and things have changed drastically. And Marilyn Monroe really was the image of the Me Too movement like no one else. And she's kind of the mirror image of all of us mothers and daughters. She's everything we revere, but also despise about ourselves, things where we failed, where we've had successes, beauty queens, wives, mothers, businesswomen, divorced, married, whatever. She's had all of those elements in her. And, it's an interesting question you asked, where does it come from? She was the most glamorous, or still is, the most glamorous, vulnerable, and complex star. And a friend of mine who gave me my cover blurb is Elizabeth Beller, and she did a book on Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and it became the FX Love Story. Her book was the basis for FX Love Story. And we were talking about these two women, how, they're both so tragic and blonde and beautiful, and they died way before their time, like Princess Diana. And these women never get to explain themselves. They're always thought of, by hearsayers and naysayers in the aftermath. So I thought it would be cool to give Marilyn the world that we all would have wanted for her, the life we would have wanted, because people see her as either a tragic, dumb blonde swallowed up by Hollywood, or they see her as this goddess, this icon who never lived out the legend. So I'm doing it for them.
And I feel like that's really wrapped up in I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but like the very first chapter, the last chapter before the epilogue, I feel like that is just like a perfect summary that just brought to mind when you were saying that. So it takes place on Cape Cod, and you also created the Cape Cod Book Festival.
I did.
And so I'm wondering, do you want to just talk about your connection to Cape Cod? You clearly.
So I grew up, sure. No, I grew up in Boston, and I spent my summers on the Cape when I was a little girl. And I always wanted to raise my kids here. So I ended up raising my family here in Barnstable Village. And I fell in love with all of the people, and all of them in some way had influence on this project. So, my neighbors were the Vonnegut's, Kurt Vonnegut's daughter and his family, Norman Mailer and his son. Norman's son is on my board of advisors. So is Edith Vonnegut, of the Vonnegut family, on my board of advisors for the festival. The Kennedys were a huge part of my life growing up, and we're all friends, especially Ethel's kids. So all of them collectively had some influence on this book, but it's not about them. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's that whole era, that generation, that bygone thing, that Camelot feel,
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit more about your writing process too for this book? I mean, it's so fascinating to me. I love to hear about, are you a discover writer? Do you plot everything out as you go? What was the research like? All of that.
Well, the research was intense because, first I had to obtain the autopsy report. And in the autopsy report, I learned very early on that this really could have happened. It's a good conspiracy theory. This is a fun conspiracy theory. It's not some horrible thing. It's a nice thing. So, the only two people to see Marilyn dead were Eunice Murray, her housekeeper, and Dr. Greenson, her psychiatrist. Several hours, as I said, went by before anyone called the police. And at that point, all the records were, things were rearranged. The table next to her bed, there was no water where she would have taken pills, whatever. And later phone records were seized, things like that. And then the next person to see her was the people from the mortuary who brought her body out zipped up in a bag so no one saw the body again. And then the third one was Thomas Noguchi, who's the coroner to the stars. And he was famous for being fired and rehired several times in California for sensationalizing very famous deaths. So I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. And then the last one was Joe DiMaggio, her husband, who threw a funeral for her, but it was closed casket. So again, no one saw her body after she died. And I thought, well, okay, what if she lived? So that was that process. And then writing, I think with all writing, a part of you becomes a part of this. And because I know Barnstable Village and I know the people and I know the players and the fishermen and the locals, it was easy to just put myself in that situation. But I can't say too much because it gives away the plot, you know? But it's all about the granddaughter. I think it's really for a younger generation as well as the older generation.
Yeah.
It's really for the granddaughter because, all young women today and what their struggles are, it's a different world than it was back in the 60s.
100%.
Or even in 2010, it's a different world, or 2020, it's a different world.
Yeah. It's really great. I mean, I remember growing up, my family was obsessed with the Kennedys. I'm from Maine. And so and Marilyn, and I loved reading this book and I was like so excited to talk to you. So one question I did have was the role of the reporters, and you have the book kind of from their point of view rather than like Marilyn's point of view, which is what I first thought maybe when I started reading it, that maybe we'd be seeing like Marilyn's secret life on Cape Cod, but no, it's from the role of these two reporters.
Well, it is, but as we get going and the granddaughter is exposed, we don't know yet if she knows who she is. So we discover Marilyn in her voice, whether she's alive or not, through the granddaughter and through all of what she unfolds and what we learn through the granddaughter, how her grandmother treated her, how she read to her at bedtime, took her to school, whatever the scenario. So we learn about what would have happened to Marilyn moving forward had she lived. By the way, one of my reporters is from New Hampshire, not Maine. Never mind. But we love Maine. I love Maine.
Maine is delightful. So I love to ask all authors this question. What is a book you're reading right now that you are obsessed with?
I just finished, this woman owes me a commission. I just finished Maria Semple's book, Go Gently. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I think it was also an Oprah pick. I absolutely love it. But the problem for me is when people ask me, what are you reading? I run a festival that I founded. So I'm reading books that either, big authors are coming to me and saying, hey, can you read this and tell me what you think while we're in the editing process? Books that are going to come out like next fall of 2027. So it's hard because I'm always reading ahead of the time what everyone else is now reading now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you ever read something and you're like, oh, this is going to be the big talked about book?
But it's also fun when yeah, you can kind of tell, but it's also fun when I can download a book that I choose to read. So I just downloaded last night Villa Coco, which is supposed to be a huge one. I don't remember the author's name, but I wasn't prepared for that question, but I just downloaded it. So that's supposed to be a big summer pick.
Great. So is there anything that you want to add that you think I didn't cover today?
No, I think you're fantastic. I just think people should buy the book.
Yes. Where can they find it?
So your favorite independent bookstore, maybe Marilyn is the name of the book, or, I always promote bookstores, but it's also on Amazon and, Kindle, wherever you get your books. So hopefully the audio soon too, but people are liking reading it. And the thing I'm getting from women that are reading it is they say they cry tears of joy at the end, which is really sweet, for the final page. So that's nice. I want to leave people feeling good. We need feel good right now. We need love and hope right now in this world. So this book gives you love and it gives you a lot of hope.
So great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on.